Good evening, everyone.
Hello, everyone. We are excited to share with you our 7 must-know lessons to scale short-term rentals fast. And I was just like cracking up in the last hour or so of how crazy the last 9 months has been as we've scaled the short-term rental portfolio. And I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much to learn and there's so much to teach. And how are we going to fit it all into one presentation? But we've tried to distill it down to the things that can help you with scaling a short-term rental portfolio or really just scaling any sort of business, right? The thing about business is that once you know how to scale one business, you can generally apply those lessons to almost any type of business.
Yeah, we've tried to, we believe in timeless things and timeless fashion and timeless relationships and timeless principles. And these are principles you can apply to any business. We really love starting new businesses. We're just entrepreneurial junkies that way, and it does get easier with repetition. Repetition is the mother of all mastery. So if you're starting a business, if you're in the throes of growing or scaling a business, hopefully there's some nuggets for you to take away. And we're going to make it hyper applicable to short-term rentals. You can kind of see what that journey looks like. If you're an investor in one of our funds, you can see how that's impacting your investment for the better. And if you're operating a short-term rental or two yourself or 10, hopefully you have some actual takeaways here. Feel free to pepper chat with questions. Could be high-level business questions or very specific short-term rental questions. And we want to just deliver tremendous value for everyone who's here with us tonight.
Absolutely. Excited to see all of you tonight. I know Rachel was changing some Zoom settings around passwords and those sorts of things, so some folks are continuing to join. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Maybe tell us where you're joining us from, and let us know if you have any short-term rentals yourself. I'm curious to hear that. And then, like Nick said, we love questions, kind of keeps us engaged, and we want this to be information that's meaningful to all of you. So ready to jump in?
Let's jump in.
Our slide share.
We've got some bullet points to cover.
All right. Here we are. So I think our screen share is active now. Here we go. These are our 7 must-know lessons to scale short-term rentals fast. This is one of our short-term rentals, and I believe that is...
I couldn't tell you.
That's
one of ours. Oh, that is the Nicholas 311.
I was going to say that's Nicholas because the extra window above the patio door.
Yeah.
Awesome. Here we go.
Nicholas. So just a quick mention that we do have Fund 4 open for investment right now. We have about 11 million out of 15 million in commitments. We have about 6 million, over 6 million now that's fully funded. So we still have some opportunity in that fund if you'd like to jump in. We've built a lot of financial success with short-term rentals in Fund 1 and 2. And we see lots of success on the horizon for Fund 4 as well. If you have any questions, you can reach out to Rachel here in chat or whatever. You can ask questions about that as well.
Absolutely.
A little bit about us. We just recently updated these slides. They had not been updated in quite some time, but we have about a third of a billion now, over a third of a billion in assets under management. So that's pretty cool. We've raised over 70 million in capital. Looked up our kind of lifetime real estate sales. I'm a licensed real estate salesperson in the state of Minnesota, and over 180 million in real estate sales. We have the privilege to be a part of Gary Keller's personal mastermind, which is the most elite real estate mastermind on earth. And we're now over 50 million in ground up construction. So just a few stats about us and why when we speak, we have some authority. We've been doing this for a while. We've been doing it at significant scale, and we have over 50 short-term rentals now that we've created in the last 9 months. So just a few numbers about us that might give our voice a little bit of weight.
Yeah. So 9 months ago, I wasn't pregnant. When this picture was taken, I was like 17 weeks pregnant. Now I'm like 30 something weeks pregnant. And I feel every additional week of pregnancy. And 9 months ago, we didn't have any short-term rentals. So we've been doing long-term, just kind of, traditional long-term rental asset ownership and property management for well over a decade now, and hadn't really dipped our toe into the short-term rental world. And we'll talk about in this presentation about why we made the decision to go into the short-term world. And since then, we have launched 50 units. So the lessons that we're sharing tonight are about that trajectory of launching from 0 to 50 short-term rental units in about 9 months, and then sharing some plans about what our plans are as we continue to grow this portion of our portfolio.
So it's an ancient piece of wisdom that maybe you've heard before, but real estate is hyper local. So there's a lot of short-term rental boot camps out there, and they've got lots of great generic advice. We had people who have invested in our funds, experts fly out, come, tour our properties and give us some advice. We solicited lots of different diverse opinions and perspectives. And I think our biggest takeaway was that real estate's hyper local. One of the people who came out, they have multi-million-dollar Airbnbs in Austin, Texas that rent for 10,000 a night. And you host weddings. It's like a wedding venue level, type experience. And we have a very different tourism culture here in Rochester, Minnesota. It's medical tourism. People are not flying in from all over the country to get married in Rochester. They're flying here to get well. And so we tried like some really premium units. We tried some basic units. And over time, I feel like we kind of dialed in on the thing that, worked really well for us in our market here. The person with the luxury wedding venue level Airbnb in Austin, they use like more premium linens than we use. And we looked at them, we're like, man, these linens are really expensive. We ordered a set, and it didn't seem like it really helped our guest experience and wasn't worth the cost. Every market is going to be completely different. So the most important thing you can do is have a really good grasp on your local market, the market that you choose to engage in, the characteristics about that market. One of the first things you want to think about is the regulatory climate. We really like how Rochester is a very mature regulatory climate. So there's a very strict regime in place. If there weren't regulations, probably everything would be an Airbnb because there's so much medical tourism here. You're restricted on the number of units you can have in a particular apartment building. There's permits and inspections and stuff that are required, and then other maybe more obvious characteristics like seasonality of the market. We were just working with one of our coaching clients, and they're divesting one of their short-term rentals, and in their market in the Smokies, there's a huge amount of new supply that's coming online right now, and these people don't necessarily need to make a profit. There's just new supply that's coming online, and it's not good to be competing against people who don't necessarily need to make a profit, fighting kind of a headwind there against new supply. So be in touch with your market. Are you in an area that's like a high regulatory climate with constricted supply? Well, that could be a really lucrative market to be engaged in. Or are you in a unregulated market with lots of new supply? Well, that could be a headwind that you're up against.
I think one thing that's really important to note is who is visiting your location. We all have a human tendency to sort of believe that our customers are similar to us. And at times that can be true, right? At times we can really serve our customers because we've felt their pain before, we've been in their psychology before. But it's also important to really think about that customer's journey and maybe how your experience informs that customer's journey, but staying in curiosity and really getting to understand their needs. So, for example, Nick and I use a lot of short-term rentals when we travel. That's because we're traveling for pleasure with our family. We have 4 young children, so we need those additional bedrooms. We want that kitchen to make all of our peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, all of that. We want the laundry to take care of all the laundry that comes from 6 children. Well, that's very different than the people that are coming to Rochester who are, as Nick said, they're often coming because they're seeking care at the Mayo Clinic. Sometimes they're seeking like executive level wellness care, but most often they're seeking some type of sickness care. And so they don't necessarily feel very good. They're bringing family members with them as caretakers. They're not necessarily on vacation. And in fact, they're often spending dollars that, maybe were allocated in their family's budget for vacation, and instead are kind of making the tough decision to use those dollars to travel to Rochester for healthcare. So they have a very different set of needs than, say, like what we think of when we think of our customer journey with Airbnbs. So be sure that you're thinking about that as you go through your process of whatever type of business that you're launching. Of course, your own needs and experiences can inform that, but really understanding who exactly it is that you're serving and what's called the customer journey, what their customer journey is like, so that you can build your service and product around the needs of those people.
Just a little bit about our market and why we love the Rochester market. It's home of the Mayo Clinic, as we mentioned. So there's a strong perennial tourism market. So even if there's, say, an economic downturn, people still need healthcare. And while people may not visit, the Florida Keys or something like that, they're going to come to Rochester to get healthcare. We love that it's a strong, kind of tertiary market that behaves more like a strong, secondary market, primary market. which means that we're able to offer a really high quality product that attracts kind of a premium rate, but we're able to do that on a property that maybe trades at a lower purchase price. So we're able to buy affordable properties that we're able to ultimately achieve really strong revenue on. And there's lots of markets out there. There might be one in your backyard, or one that you are very familiar with as a tourist. You need to find a market that's going to give you that dynamic one way or another if you're going to be successful in the real estate market. My favorite thing about Rochester is, of course, the Destination Medical Center Initiative and Hospital of the Future. You've heard us maybe talk about this in previous webinars, but Mayo just announced a $5 billion expansion to their campus.
This is like our equivalent of having like a lakefront property.
Yeah.
We are like Mayo front, right?
Right.
So understanding that, again, thinking about that customer journey, our clients are not necessarily looking for, the most premium unit with a view or those sorts of things. They're looking for something that's price competitive, again, because they're often spending their dollars that they had allocated for other, more fun things in their family's budget. And they're looking for proximity to Mayo so that while they're here, they have the fewest number of decisions to make. They don't have to worry about GPS and all sorts of other things. They can plop down in wherever their lodging is and then get to and from their medical appointments.
Yep, and we've figured out that proximity to Mayo, literally how close are you on that little Airbnb map? It's absolutely everything. We've got one really nice property, but it's kind of far away from Mayo, and it gets like a 30% lower ADR than a not so nice property we have that's right next door to Mayo. So we started this bullet point by saying real estate is hyper local. It's location, 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 and that's something that you really cannot hit on too hard when you're looking at growing a short-term rental operation, or any real estate business for that matter.
We need another little star on our map. So right
Ooh,
next
yeah.
to Zick, Lofts, and Uptown Landing, those 3 stars in a row, kind of right in the center of the picture. We also acquired a property. It's a triplex. It's the only triplex in our entire portfolio. And we specifically acquired it to operate it as a short-term rental. So we'll talk about that. We need to update our map here so that we have 4 little stars in a row right there on that city block.
So a great component of knowing location is to go to that location, or go to the gemba, as a Japanese person might say, the place of action or the place of real work. This is some fun photos of us furnishing our company's second short-term rental property, I believe.
I think it was
Third, something like that.
Yeah. Somewhere around there. It was very early in the process.
So we're
I
there.
love how our son is resting his feet on your shoulders while you are actively working.
I hope this isn't a metaphor for like entitlement or something like that for our children.
To be clear, they did not watch TV most of the time that they were there. Most of the time we were having them work, unbox all of this stuff. You can see pull up all the styrofoam, all of that stuff. And then eventually I'm like, hey, let's get these kids on the TV, and apparently resting on Nick's shoulder. Oh my gosh. And that's when there was enough calm amongst the chaos for me to take a picture. But get into the gemba. That comes from Japanese manufacturing, from Toyota, which means go to the place of real work. So we knew when we launched our short-term rental portfolio that we weren't just going to launch 1 or 2. We knew that we were going to do this at scale. And so we wanted to pick out the exact couch that we wanted, the exact end table. We wanted to touch these things, feel these things, see what the packaging was like, see how long it took to put the things together, how everything screwed together, all of the things, touch all of the glassware, just really make sure that we understood that experience before we invested, literally 6-7 figures in all of the household items that are needed to run all of these short-term rentals. And I think one of the great things about real estate, if you choose to do active real estate, is getting your family involved. So this was something that we could get our children involved. They loved basically being able to just tear all that cardboard apart and throw things around. And they were like using this as kind of like this is a first floor unit. So there was no one below us. They were kind of using it as like a mosh pit for a while. Yeah, it was super fun. So that they can see where real value comes from. And so that Nick and I, as we're guiding our team and growing this line of business, we can speak from a place of firsthand experience. We can speak from a place of authority. I think that's a critical piece to starting and scaling a business. You don't need to know how to do everything. You don't need to know how to be the expert in everything. You don't need to know how to do everything for an indefinite time period. But you get a tremendous amount of experience by laying your hands on the thing of real work. and seeing what it's like from not only your customer's perspective, but from your team members' perspective. So we wanted to put together these units and understand, how many hours does it take to unbox all of this stuff? It actually took way longer than like you maybe would have predicted. If you get, say, a set of dishes or pots and pans at home, you can probably unbox that thing in 10 or 15 minutes. But when you're doing that in the equivalent of a whole household unit, it takes so much longer, and you get all this like cardboard dust everywhere. So you have to do this very thorough deep cleaning. And we did that with 1 or 2 units, and it was exciting to do. And that allowed us to then structure things for our team as we were rolling out our short-term rental pipeline of how many hours would it take for each unit to come together, and how many hours of that was, say, like putting together the furniture, getting furniture deliveries, putting together household items, doing the cleaning. Those are all very different buckets of work. Doing that last little touch where you fluff the pillows and put the throw rug on the couch arm and those sorts of things. But if you're really thinking about doing something at scale, I can't recommend enough. Go to the place of real work, go to the Gemba, be excited about it, and know that your time and your expertise and your firsthand experience with that is what will allow you to create the systems and processes that lead to your success.
Beautiful.
I just got so excited about talking about the kids, and it was such a fun night.
I love going to the Gemba with you.
Yeah, you can see it was winter because it was super dark out, and it was probably only
This is our ideal date night.
7:30 at night or something.
Why would you sit at a TGI Fridays trying to shepherd your kids around when you could do this? This is so much better.
Yep, it was so fun. I see you're putting together the chair there, and
I love these chairs.
I never noticed before that Shepherd's feet were on your back. I'm just cracking up at that.
We bought like 100 of these chairs. They're fantastic chairs. They're cheap. They're high quality. They're solid wood. There's no duplicate for that.
Absolutely.
When you go to the Gemba, when you get involved in the thing that you do to create value, you find what we call an unfair advantage or asymmetric advantage. You have something about you that might be advantageous or disadvantageous. You need to avoid your disadvantageous, kind of aspects of you or your business that you're trying to create. Here's a few examples here. Some of our advantages. We mentioned how Rochester restricts STRs, and we actually already have all of the permitting required to roll out these STRs. So, ordinary person that like puts an Airbnb on Zillow, puts it on Airbnb, puts a property on Airbnb, they'll get a cease and desist from the city within 48 hours. It's a very rigorous regime, and you're not allowed to operate an Airbnb without that license. We already have those licenses, so a pretty huge advantage. We also have free assets to experiment with. So what we did was we took some units that we had a feeling would be vacant through the winter months. Unfortunately, if you don't rent a unit by right about now, there's a chance that unit could be vacant till like next February or so, maybe next March. So we took a few units that we thought might struggle with some seasonal vacancy, and basically it's a free unit to work with. That's a pretty huge advantage. And we already have a really deep bench of facilities, staff members, the cleaners, and they had some time on their hands in our off season. We need those people in peak turnover season, and then we need to make sure that those people stay productively busy in the off season. So it's pretty ideal work. And then it turns out that a huge portion of our staff comes from hotels. So huge advantages, like hopelessly unfair advantages that we have. But let's think about our disadvantages too, because our time is worth quite a bit. Elaine and I's time, our company's time. We have a pretty good way to make money already, right? We have a very high opportunity cost. If we're spending time spinning up short-term rentals, that time maybe we could have spent buying more apartment buildings or something like that. We are competing against people who don't necessarily need to make a profit. So that's something you always need to be very conscientious about. So Airbnb is an interesting, kind of ecosystem, because a lot of people have like a vacation home that they might rent when they're not using it. Those people aren't really profit motivated. If they hit like a break even, they might be happy about that. They might be, using their own labor and not charging for that appropriately. And you really want to avoid being in competition with people who don't need to make money. That's one thing that's really nice about long-term rental is there's very few long-term rentals out there where you're not necessarily, competing against, people who are, just trying to get a break even. Most people in long-term rental are trying to make money. And then, probably our biggest disadvantage is that we did not yet have mastery in this industry, which makes it really tough to compare, right? Because we know that we're really good at long-term rental. So spinning up this new business, we're going to be inclined to compare it. In fact, every month we compare how much money do we make in short term versus how much money would we have made in long term. And it kind of paints like an unfair, picture of short term rental, because it's going to take years for us to really get great at it the way we are at long term rental. So we have to be very conscientious about that going in. So those are some of our advantages and disadvantages. Maybe you have a rich uncle who is dying to get into a vacation property, but he doesn't want to take care of it. Well, maybe you could run it as an Airbnb when he's not using it. I mean, that's kind of a caricature, but I guarantee you there's 46 people on the call right now. At least one of you has a rich uncle who wants to own a vacation property. We just had dinner a couple nights ago with a couple who's in that exact situation. Maybe you have connections with bankers and you get very favorable loans. Maybe you live in a vacation area that you're really in touch with, really well, and you could operate a property in a hot market that might otherwise be inaccessible. So find your unfair advantage. Like right now, while you're here, jot it down. What are your advantages and disadvantages? What do you bring to the table, and what do you need to avoid that would help you be successful in anything that you do?
So that was lesson one, which is real estate is always hyper local. And we, spoke about that very literally in terms of understanding the market that you're in. And then we went even deeper than that, that it's local to your customer and their journey. And then it's local to you. What do you bring to the table? So that's our first lesson, is real estate is hyper local. Let's move on to lesson two. Lesson two comes from our favorite, the great Warren Buffett. Be counter-cyclical. So Warren has, the pithy quote, be fearful when others are greedy, be greedy when others are fearful. Many of you, may have experience with short-term rentals, or you're, following in Facebook communities or other things. And you may know that at the time that we were launching short-term rentals, say like late last summer, that's when a lot of people were really struggling in the short-term rental market. There was kind of that boom through COVID with very low interest rates. There really wasn't a lot of international travel. So people were traveling domestically. People wanted to be outside of hotels. They wanted more space where they could maybe, travel with their family and their extended family, but kind of stay, in one home instead of traveling, all around a city the way they might have pre-COVID. So a lot of things just kind of coalesced to make that pandemic period incredibly lucrative for short-term rentals. And then things kind of softened after that, and many short-term rental markets were struggling with additional vacancy, lower average daily rent, those sorts of things, additional regulation. And so why in the world did we enter the short-term rental market? And as Nick said, we had such a great alternative, which was continuing to just operate our units as long-term rentals, the way we've done all the way back to 2011. And it's because we very much believe in the idea of being counter-cyclical and looking for opportunities when others are hesitant. So there's a concept in economics which is called euphoria. And when a market is feeling euphoric, right, you can just imagine like social pressure would make you want to participate in the market at that time. And that's actually the worst time to participate in a market. The best time to participate in the market is when there's hesitancy in the market. So we sensed that kind of euphoric period around short-term rentals had waned. And we saw some data, which we're going to go through here in the next couple of slides, that indicated that there was hesitancy in the market coupled with this opportunity to be counter-cyclical and to provide a need, to fulfill a need in the market that others weren't fulfilling because they were exiting the market. So our second lesson is be counter-cyclical.
So we recommend being a student of the seasons. It's impossible to, predict the future with perfect accuracy, but history does rhyme, and the seasons tend to repeat over and over again. So this is a chart of ADR, or average daily rate, in our market. And you can see, things were kind of on a slow upward trend in our market between, 2019 and 2020. And then something happened in early 2020 where ADR plummeted. The pandemic hit, and on the one hand, you can almost see how that could be like lucrative for the Mayo Clinic and medical tourism. But when people were afraid of dying of COVID, even if they, were dying of cancer, they still didn't come. And so, the RevPAR chart, I try to keep it simple. So I just have ADR here. The RevPAR chart was even more dramatic. RevPAR fell by 50% almost immediately. Here you can see ADR went from about $117 a day to $102 a day, which is a dramatic shift. You think about profit margins. This is a dramatic shift. RevPAR, I think, went from $75 a day to $35 a day overnight. And then you can see in 2023, things had mostly recovered. And that's when we said, we think now's a good time to get in. And if you kind of surveyed the sentiment in our community, Airbnb operators, hotel operators, they all had a very sour sentiment because all they could feel was how bad things were in that post-COVID world. But if you look at that chart, like you don't have to be a genius to imagine that thing's going to keep going up. And you fast forward today, and ADR is pushing $125 a day. And again, these small moves in ADR drive massive shifts in profitability. So we've seen our short-term rentals be extraordinarily successful. Our RevPAR is currently pushing about $97 a day, depending on which day, week, month you want to look at. Again, that compares to like $75 RevPAR pre-COVID and got all the way down to $35 in RevPAR during the pandemic. You just have to look at the data, be dispassionate, and think, where's the puck going? Not where's the puck today, as Wayne Gretzky would say, and be a student of the seasons. Know that spring always follows winter. So if you can be a winter warrior, if you can invest in winter when
A winter warrior. I don't think I've heard that one before. Did you make that up tonight?
maybe, yeah.
We should get it trademarked.
Okay, well, we can do that. If you can be greedy when others are fearful, you can be extraordinarily successful. The only thing you need to do to be to have like life-changing wealth in your life is to have a belief that's the opposite of the commonly held belief, to be right, and then have the courage to bet big on it. To say, I believe this so strongly, I'm gonna put it all on this thing. And that's the story you see over and over and over again through history of some of the most successful people.
Absolutely. So that's lesson number 2, which is be counter-cyclical. Comes from, the great Warren Buffett, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy. If you have any questions, guys, pop them in the chat. We want to make sure this is interactive and gets you, the lessons that you want so that you can get your first short-term rental, your second, your 10th, whatever it is for you. So hopefully so far this is interesting. You guys are taking a ton of notes, but if you have questions, definitely pop those into chat. Our third lesson of our 7 lessons that we'll cover today is be data driven. And I want to start by talking about kind of the psychology of business, right? Because so many of us, particularly women, are sort of taught to believe that like we're not good at math or we're not good at data or all of those things. And I promise you that is 100% not true. I promise you that is 100% not true. And the data that you need is often so much simpler than maybe you realize. I often, talk to people in all sorts of business, and they've come up with these like really like complex metrics that are hard to define and hard to understand and hard to, adequately collect the data in a consistent way so that they can make, true understanding of it and look for the trends. The data that we track in our company across all domains in our company is really very simple things. It's like how many maintenance tickets were closed last week? What's our customer satisfaction survey data for how clean was the unit when someone moved in? How many homes do we have under contract for buyers and sellers? Like really simple things that anyone in our team could collect, even if they have no relationship whatsoever with, say, like the maintenance department. They could log into the maintenance portal and see tickets closed last week, and there's the number. And anyone could look at what we call our pipeline and have a good understanding of what's going on in the business. So we're going to share a few of the what we call KPIs, the key performance indicators that we have for our short-term rental portfolio. And I encourage you to adopt similar KPIs for your short-term rental portfolio, even if it's just one single unit. And then any type of business that you're thinking about, maybe you're thinking about, going into private practice. Well, some KPIs might be things like how many patients have you seen in a week? What's the, average waiting time for a patient between when they call you and when they can be seen in your office for the first time? What's the satisfaction of a simple survey that you do once per week with your team members? But be data driven and don't be afraid to collect data and to make it simple so that you can understand it and use that information to drive your business. So leverage analytics to make informed decisions. The most important thing is you are looking for patterns. It's more important that you collect a piece of data on a regular basis. We collect all of our data first thing Monday morning with most of the people in the company. The pattern is so much more important than any one single data point. Measure often. Again, we measure every Monday. visualizations are critical. There's something about, humans that we're very visual creatures, and we tend to be able to see those patterns easier in a way that's cognitively easier for us to understand if they're in some sort of visual format versus if we're just, looking at numbers on a spreadsheet. And then stay in curiosity. The thing that you don't want to do with your data is look at it and rush to judgment of, something like, say here, this is our income versus units online. And you can see that it is a very, positive upward trajectory. But what we wouldn't want to do is look at this and sort of instantly assume something like, well, maybe it's because our furnishings are awesome. And then we like double, triple down on our furnishings. And instead, you want to stay in curiosity and continue to collect more qualitative data to support your quantitative data of like, well, why is this trend happening? Let me survey my team. Let me survey my customers. Let me particularly survey the very happy customers and the very unhappy customers to collect, a full robust set of data. Let me look at the market data. Let me see how this data can, how my data compares to, say, competitors' data, to really understand the trends, but stay in curiosity around your data so that you can identify the root cause of where why the data is moving in the way that it's moving.
Absolutely. Lots of great questions here. What portion of your rentals come through Airbnb versus other booking sites and direct bookings? So about 80% of all of our bookings come through Airbnb. Probably about 15% are direct bookings through our Guesty platform. And then
that's one of the things we track.
Yep.
And we have a spreadsheet.
We know these numbers, and I can pull them up in real time and tell you the exact number of direct bookings we got last week, last month, last quarter. And then the other 5% come from booking.com, other portals. Airbnb tends to dominate, and there's also a huge discrepancy in booking quality as well. So we tend to get our lowest quality bookings through booking.com, and the worst bookings from Expedia. So it's an interesting pattern of data to observe. Direct bookings are absolutely critical to your success as a short-term rental operator.
Yeah. And then another question was, how much do you spend on furnishing for each unit of an STR?
Right now, probably about $6,000, including materials and labor. So we are not personally furnishing those units. We have staff that furnish those units, and we track the amount of hours spent to bring a unit online, as well as down to the dollar, how many units or how many dollars were spent to furnish that unit. We have really high quality like sleeper sofas that we get. That's a huge spend item. Our mattresses are a huge spend item. But then over time, we've curated a set of really, really inexpensive pieces of furniture. Like we get these beautiful live edge coffee tables. So it's like solid wood, gorgeous piece of furniture, and just has a couple simple hairpin steel legs. So it's a very simple piece of furniture to assemble. Some of these pieces of furniture, they've got 27 different parts, and our labor cost, is as much as the cost of the piece of furniture. So these tables, they cost like $50. Very inexpensive piece of furniture. They look beautiful. And then we just use the exact same piece of furniture in every single unit. So that helps us get quantity discounts. We'll buy a dozen sofas at a time and get a huge discount on those. And that really ratchets down our per unit spend to furnish a unit.
And then one thing to keep in mind that amount is, our average unit is a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment unit. So we're not furnishing, multi-bedroom, single family homes or, large vacation homes. We're furnishing, the equivalent of like an apartment unit that would compete with, say, a stay at a local hotel.
Someone just asked, which sleeper sofa do we use? You have now exceeded my pay grade, so I'm going to phone a friend and see if I can get an answer.
I bet we can
while
get
we're
an answer
online.
by the time we're done. So measure often, identify your KPIs. That means key performance indicators, track them weekly. And a very, very, very important KPI that you should have for your short-term rental, or again, for any business that you're starting and scaling, is revenue. Until you have proven strong revenue, everything else is a vanity metric. So, I'll hear people talk about, say, like, the size of my mailing list or the size of my Facebook group, or the star rating I have on Airbnb, or those sorts of things. That's not to say that those things aren't important, But revenue is so much more important than all of those things that you really want to focus on revenue. It said that revenue is the lifeblood of an organization. It's what allows an organization to stay alive. So we track revenue. You can see here going back, to our very first unit, which was September 5th of 2023.
We know the day that it was born because we were out there furnishing it. But until you have revenue, your business is just an idea. So our business was born September 5th, but it didn't actually generate revenue until September 25th.
Yeah.
Very important to know these things.
So that would have been the day that we took that unit out of long-term rental inventory and said to our long-term rental team, hey, do not offer this unit for rent. You cannot get a lease on this unit. We're going to, move it into this new short-term rental business. And it took us a couple of weeks to do things like figure out the furnishings and the household goods that we wanted, to get those things delivered, to get those things assembled, to get our Airbnb, platform ready, all of those things. So about 20 days later, we had some revenue. We had $944 revenue. And you can see at that time, we then had 2 units. And you can see here, if you're at a place where you are able to look at the screen, this would be a great one to look at. You can see that it's, I wouldn't say slow and steady, it's swift and steady, but it's steady. There's very few times here that, in fact, there's no times where we went from like 0 to 10 or 10 to 50. We went from 1 to 2 to 4 to 6 to 8 to 10, 12, on and on and on. And then the data that we cut off here is in May. And then we track our 30-day trailing revenue. So having something that's very easy to define, that anyone on your team would know, what that means and where to pull that data, and that it's a consistent measurement. It's more important that you track something consistently for, say, at least a year than you sort of fool yourself of like, oh, well, now I want to track, the last quarter of revenue. So let me change my number. Or, now that we have more units, I really only want to focus on the revenue that we've had in the last week. So I'm going to change my number. So then all of a sudden you might have, say 12 weeks of 30-day trailing revenue, and then 12 weeks of, say, 90-day trailing revenue, and then you changed your mind, and then you have 12 weeks of 7-day trailing revenue. Well, that data is like 5% as valuable than if you had just tracked, 36 weeks of 30-day trailing revenue. So it's more important that you stay consistent, and then that you have like, the absolute perfect metric. We do change our metrics at times, but we try to limit it to like once per year, or we'll track things side by side. We're like, hey, now that we have enough units, we really want to hone in on, say, like revenue of the last week. Well, then we would add another column in our Google spreadsheet, and it would be, say, 30-day trailing revenue, and then the next column over would be 7-day trailing revenue. I want to caution you against just adding rows or columns and columns and columns, because you don't want to get so much data that it's cognitively hard to understand, or that it takes you or your team a long time to collect. But I just want to say that if you're thinking about a new piece of data, it's better to, say, track them side by side than to abandon your old metric in lieu of a new metric. And now in August 12th, so just a week ago, we have 51 units online, and we are right around $100,000 in 30-day trailing revenue.
It's very exciting. That means on an annualized basis, we're going to hit $1 million in revenue on this line of business. That's a big deal. So like a good benchmark is most people in any business, they can usually generate, say, $500,000 in revenue just with hustle. But to get to, $1 to $3 million in revenue, that usually takes building a team. You're starting to create a real business. And then when you hit $10 million in revenue, that's a huge, huge benchmark to hit. Not very many businesses in any industry get to $10 million in revenue. And that's when you have something that's truly interesting to like a private equity firm to potentially purchase. So I would say that $1 million revenue target, that's a huge target to hit, because that means that you probably haven't just hustled your way there in any industry. And then if you have a clear path to go from 1 million to 10 million in revenue, you have something that's truly interesting. And I think that's the case for us here. So hitting that $1 million, annualized revenue figure, that was a huge win. And that's why we're planning to take a little breath, a little pause, dial things in, and then say, is there a clear path to get to 10 million revenue on this line of business?
Oh, that's so exciting. That just fills my heart with joy. That's why I married you. because you say things like that and it makes me very happy.
Thank you.
So it's so important to lead with revenue. We have another slide on that, just to really hone in. Until you have a month's worth of revenue, you don't have a business, you have an idea.
Yeah.
And it's okay to have ideas. We want all of you on this call to have an idea, whether it's a short-term rental, a medical practice, a lemonade stand. I don't care what it is. We want all of you to have these big dreams of, hey, I could create this unique value in the world. I could serve people with an idea that I have a product or a service, but really focus on what's the fastest path to getting to revenue. Revenue is the lifeblood of the organization that allows you to reinvest back into the business, to get more tools and supplies and equipment, to hire people, to get into coaching groups and masterminds, to learn from the best of the best. So lead with revenue. It is the most important thing when you are starting and scaling a business. Next up is stay in curiosity.
So I'm just messaging our team. I have a photo of the couch that we use. I'm asking Rachel to look up what the link is that she can share in chat.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get that for you guys.
Yep. So this is a chart of our occupancy on the top and our average daily rate on the bottom. And this is coming straight out of Airbnb when we had just a couple of units. So maybe it doesn't feel relatable to you to look at the 50 short-term rental units. Well, let's look at just having one. So you see we have zero revenue and zero occupancy in October. Then we got up to 50% occupancy in November, and we had this pretty like headline ADR there of $120 a night. And then we got up to like 75% occupancy in January, but our ADR went down. Why was that? It'd be easy to get caught up and say, gosh, it seems like things are going backwards. Our ADR went down. And then you can see our ADR stayed pretty flat at right around $100 a night. And to this day, that $100 a night appears to be kind of a benchmark for our market. It's a fascinating thing. And we've been able to push an occupancy. So we're pushing something like 95% occupancy, and in many cases higher than 95% occupancy, while still maintaining that ADR. It's been difficult for us to push a higher ADR. As you start analyzing the data, just ask yourself high quality questions. Well, why do we think our ADR went down, and why is it that it seems like it's flat here? You don't even necessarily have to understand it. You can just accept that it's a reality. It probably wouldn't be wise for us to put like a premium, line of business into service, because we found that almost regardless of the quality, we kind of have like low, medium, high quality units. They all seem to settle around the same ADR. There's a shockingly little variance, at least in our market. Your market might be totally different.
If you're in a vacation market, like everything that Nick just said for the last 20 seconds is probably completely not true, right? There's people that are coming into that market that are, trying to stretch their dollar for their family vacation. And there's people coming into that market that want to have a luxury vacation, right? Just kind of making some general assumptions about, say, a vacation market. But again, going back to understanding the customers that are coming for Mayo, they're often, middle-class families that have an unplanned trip to a hospital far away. It's kind of outside of anything they ever thought they might do. They just sort of always thought, well, I would just get healthcare at, my local hospital, or maybe, the next big city over. I didn't necessarily think I'd need to go. And they're always like, is it Rochester, New York? Oh, it's that one in Minnesota, the tiny one in the prairie. So they're going to this, sort of strange place to get healthcare. They're spending dollars that they don't necessarily want to spend. And they are looking for a clean, safe place that's walkable to Mayo, that's simple, where they can have a bed for, say, themselves and a caretaker or two. And the things like the kitchen and the laundry, those are, sort of helpful for them, but really they just want that walkability to Mayo. I had Rachel pull up the cost of a one-night stay, ADR's average daily rate. That's what Nick keeps quoting. The cost of a one-night stay at Hilton Mayo Clinic, which is the #1 Hilton brand for the last 3 years in all of North America. So to say an incredibly premium hotel is $169 per night. So that's kind of like the nicest place you can stay in Rochester is $169 per night. Now, you're not getting a kitchen. There's probably some type of laundry somewhere in the building, but it's not like right there, right there in your unit. And then by the time you add on our cleaning fee and the Airbnb costs and those sorts of things, like the total cost per night is kind of right in line with that.
$89 cleaning fee. So if we're at, $100, kind of base ADR, we're at $189 for a one night stay. Now, if you stay longer, then it gets cheaper.
Yep.
Yep.
Next slide.
Yeah. Bunch of little questions come in. Do you do nightly minimums, 2-3 nights? No, we do not. And what percentage does Airbnb charge? That was when we were talking about what percentage of our booking comes through Airbnb. It varies. They have a dynamic fees. It's such a brilliant system. Up to 17%, though we often pay a much lower percentage. Sometimes just a few percent, especially on longer stays. I've been in touch with other people who are kind of further down this journey than us. And as you get larger, you do actually get group buying power with Airbnb. At some point, probably between here and 100 units, we'll be able to negotiate our fees to be lower with Airbnb, significantly lower. You have enough kind of pricing power that you're able to do that. Staying in curiosity here, it seemed like it was hard for us to push ADR, so we asked, how could we push occupancy? And we were able to do that very successfully. We'll get that here in just a little bit. Some additional revenue analytics. If you are at the Real Estate Real Life Conference in May, the chart on the left was the chart that you saw. So you can see this like really dramatic progression going from, very little revenue, barely registering to $50,000 in monthly revenue. And you maybe saw the units that were like actively being furnished, but not, generating revenue yet. And I think Elaine and I being very transparent and vulnerable with you that like we're pretty sure this is going to work out. It seems like we're able to hit that, $100 ADR, and we're going to see how hard we can push this thing, and then use some other tools to push occupancy while maintaining that pricing. And the chart on the right is how it went. So you can see back in April timeframe, we were at that 60K revenue figure, consistent with what you saw, almost identical. But then the following month, it went up to 80K, and then the following month, June, we delivered $140,000 in revenue. Now that might seem crazy that you could, double your revenue in just like a 45-day period like that. But that's the power of analytics and vision. We saw, hey, here's what's happening when we do this. Can we multiply this? Can we multiply it again? Can we multiply it again? And we bet big. We went all in on that. We knew that June was a very high demand market, high demand month in our market, and that would be the best possible time for us to bring a huge number of units online. We'd be able to get that initial bolus of bookings to fill our roster to launch them. So we had all hands on deck furnishing units, getting those units online. Team did an amazing job. And we went from, it's kind of crazy, but you look at it, we're at $50,000 in revenue in March, and even, $25,000 in revenue in February, to $145,000 in revenue for the month of June. So a very successful growth trajectory, and we see a lot of healthy growth here in the coming months. So we're excited to see how things shake out.
So that's lesson 3, be data driven. So far we've covered real estate is hyper local, be counter-cyclical, and lesson 3 was be data driven. Lesson 4, right over the halfway point, is optionality is everything. This is 100% true in short-term rentals, in any type of real estate, in any type of business. The person who has the most potential plans, the most potential ways to make revenue or launch something new or pivot in the market or have an exit is the person who will have the most successful business. Plans are useless. Planning is indispensable. I love that you use the word indispensable.
It's Eisenhower that said that, not me.
Usually you say plans are useless, planning is everything.
Well, I already said optionality was everything, so I didn't want to say planning is everything.
I see.
And the Eisenhower quote is that planning is indispensable.
Okay.
So try and
like a quarter word instead of a penny word. So what that means is sometimes as humans, we can fool ourselves into believing that specificity is accuracy. We can fool ourselves into believing that specificity is accuracy.
That's so good.
Which is, the idea that if I have an exact recipe down to the quarter teaspoon and all of the things, that I am going to get, the exact cake that I'm trying to bake. That can be true. But planning is knowing how to maneuver in the kitchen, knowing how to say, shoot, I don't have this ingredient, but I can substitute this ingredient because they're similar, or I can, change this thing because someone has an allergy or a dietary concern or whatever. That's planning is indispensable. And it's better to have sort of algorithms or pathways that you might go through and have some sense of like, well, this might happen. And if that happens, I can do these 3 things. And then this might happen. And if that happens, I can do these 3 things. than to have a set of rigid plans. So that's what it means when plans are useless, planning is indispensable. Adapting to change is more important than following a plan. A business is a living, breathing thing. There are many things that are inside of your control. There are many more things that are completely outside of your control. And then there are things at the global and macroeconomic level that are really completely outside of your control. And adapting to change is so much more important than following a plan.
Can't agree more with anything there. We see a lot of people who get themselves into a corner with short-term rentals where they go buy a $1 million beach house and there's just not much else you can do with that property. There's no alternative use for that property. In a lot of ways, if you happen to have a cabin up north that you want to, rent on the side, that actually gives you, a great option that it's just a nice property that you can enjoy. You don't necessarily have to make a profit at it. The units that we have are units that could be profitable, could be a lucrative venture, both as long-term units and as short-term units. So we love that optionality. You want to have at least 3 options in any business that you pursue. When you've only got one thing you can do, you could very easily have a huge dilemma on your hands.
Next up is start small, start now. You may recognize those 2 phrases from our timeless real estate principles. We teach that about once a year or so. We took those lessons that we learned in long-term rental and we believe that they're timeless. So we applied them to short-term rental. So how did it come to be that we went from 0 to 50 short-term rentals when we had only been doing long-term rentals for it would have been like 13 years. And in fact, we had acquired many short-term rental furnished units. And like the first thing we would do on day of closing was, end all of those bookings. We would allow the bookings to finish, but we wouldn't add in any new bookings. We'd put the furniture up on Facebook Marketplace, all of those things, because we had such a strong sort of home field advantage with our long-term rental portfolio. But we wanted to start in short-term rentals because Nick was looking at the data and the trajectory of how Rochester was changing post-pandemic with Hospital of the Future, with ADR shifting. And so we inherited a few furnished units with residents at Discovery Square, which we acquired in April of 2023. We continued those leases as midterms. And then we finally had a furnished unit go vacant in September. And you may remember that that's when we started tracking the data. We went from 0 to 1 units on our pipeline. We went from $0 of revenue to, I think that first number was $944. And in the beginning, we were like hobbling together, okay, well, this is the best couch we have and the best coffee table and the best bed. Like, let's try to put it together and get something that's nice that we're excited to put our name on, but doesn't necessarily cost us a lot. We weren't going out and buying, all that new furniture right for that first unit. And we decided to put that on Airbnb. And we were fully committed to it. That's something that's really important, is being fully committed. The psychology that you bring to a new venture in many ways determines the success.
Yes.
If you approach a new venture, let me back up one second. We all have fear. We all, have imposter syndrome and all of those things. We're all human. But I really want to encourage you to think about the venture that you have from a place of excitement and from a place of commitment of, I will do whatever it takes to make this thing successful, because that energy will carry your business forward. If you approach your new venture or your scaling venture from a place of, well, I'm not sure, and I don't know what this is going to be like, and maybe it won't work out, those things will manifest to become true. So we had to fully commit ourselves to the experiment, and we talked about it a ton. We must have talked about it every night after the kids went to bed for probably a month of like, we identify as long-term rental property managers. We identify as asset managers. We don't identify as running a short-term rental portfolio. And if we're going to do this, we need to open that space in our identity to allow that growth to happen and to be fully committed to it. Ask yourself, where is the universe asking for you to grow? What can you just say yes to? What's something that you've been pondering, or your customers have been asking for, or you've been feeling that there's a need in the market, or you've been feeling that there's a pain or a problem that you could solve? You could provide a product or a service that you can just say yes to, and then fully commit to it in your psychology, and then go out and get it done. you don't need to know the end destination, right? Like Nick even said, like, we don't know the end destination. We know that we got to 50. We know that we got to say $1 million per year in rev. We're taking a breath. We're improving our processes. We're hiring some folks so that we have, around the clock coverage, some of those things. And then we're going to make that next phase of business development of, okay, well, how do we get to 5 million in rev? How do we get to 10 million in rev? If we had started with a question of how do we get to 10 million in rev, we might have folded under the complexity of it and just said, you know what? We've got a really good long-term rental portfolio. We know, how to run this business in our sleep. Let's just continue on that. And so that's why the lesson here is start small and start now, going, kind of looping back in, like, plans are useless. Planning is everything. Stay agile, have optionality, stay in curiosity. I hope you're seeing how all of these lessons kind of weave together, whether you're starting or scaling a short-term rental portfolio or really any type of business.
Yeah, and the stakes for this are outrageously high because your greatest cost in anything that you do is your opportunity cost. People often see the cost of taking action, but the cost of not taking action is extraordinarily high. And it's not just the missing revenue, the $2,700 a month from that one unit. It's the missing revenue from 1,000 units years from now when we have this beautiful, massive line of business. What's something in your life that you could see just being this beautiful, life-changing, world-changing thing, 10, 20 years down the road? We tend to overestimate what we can do in a year, but underestimate what we can do in a decade. Try to imagine yourself 10 years from now. The business of tomorrow can make more in a good day than your business today can make in a good year. I know that sounds preposterous, but it's true. So when you have, 100 or 1,000 short-term rentals, you can make more in a good day than you can make in a good year today. Delaying growth costs you the benefits of your future business, not the benefit of that business today, but the benefit of that business 10 or 20 years from now. Today is just practice for tomorrow. I love that because it talks about the really important notion that you need to do things right and you need to do things better because you need to practice like you're going to play. And the big game, it's tomorrow, it's next week, it's not today. So 50 short-term rentals may seem like a lot, but it's nothing. It's just an experiment. And for better or worse, at our level, like we have to do $1 million revenue line of business for it to be a valid experiment. It doesn't give us useful data as to whether or not this can be a scalable business for us. And we've got some fun things to talk about where this line of business could go in the future here. But in the meantime, let's talk about what it takes to go from 1 to go to 50 to get that valid data to figure out if this is truly a scalable line of business. And that is optimizing efficiency.
So lesson 4 is optionality is everything. And lesson 5, which we'll start now, is optimize for efficiency.
Whenever you're building a business, the most important thing you can do is just start and generate some revenue. But then at some point along the line, you need to convert revenue into profit. And one of the great mistakes that early entrepreneurs make is they mistake revenue for profit. And in almost every case, the best way to increase your profit is to reduce your expenses. I'm going to say that a second time. In almost every case, Sam Walton estimated that over 90% of all the profit that he ever made in his business, probably the most successful entrepreneur in American history. If you added up all of his kids that have a piece of the business, more net worth than Jeff Bezos or Elon, or not Elon anymore, but an extraordinarily successful entrepreneur. And he said 90% of the profit came from reducing expenses, from increasing efficiency in his business. So we've got an example of our Schlage Encode locks. Schlage Encode locks. We love these. They have native lock integration with many different platforms. There's no platform lock-in. You don't have to use like a Z-Wave. There's no Bluetooth bridge or anything like that. It's a standalone lock that just hooks up directly to your Wi-Fi. We already use Schlage brand locks elsewhere in our portfolio. This is just like a little bit more expensive, a little bit fancier version of that lock. It comes in multiple different trims and stuff like that compared to like say a Yale or a Nest solution. So we absolutely love this particular lock. We put it in every single one of our short-term rentals. It's almost always going to be some form of technology, a process, something that you can do to streamline and create efficiency. Yeah.
You want to talk about our warehouse?
So this is maybe
It's like the most ridiculous thing we've ever done. It's so fun.
This is maybe a next level thing here, but when you're going to do something efficiently, if you're doing it right, the bigger you do it, the easier it gets, and the bigger you do it, the more efficient it gets. Walmart has a hopeless advantage over Black Swan in terms of their ability to procure things at a lower price. They can probably pay half or literally a quarter of the price that we're paying to get those same keypad locks. And we're able to pay a little bit lower price than you might be able to pay to get, say, a sofa or a microwave or something of that nature. So we had a little bit of extra space at our RDS building, and it's commercial space that hadn't been leased to a triple net tenant yet. So we said, let's turn this into a warehouse. Let's see what kind of economy of scale we can create. And it's economy of scale not just in purchasing things, but we were able to take our staff that maybe had a little extra time and say, hey, can you go assemble a piece of furniture? Can you go unbox some housewares? Because when Elaine and I went to the Gemba and went through what was it like to bring a unit online, we spent an extraordinary amount of time assembling furniture and unboxing things, transporting the good there, getting it to the right spot in the unit, doing everything that needs to be done to actually put the unit together was a minority of the time. The majority of the time was, unwrapping a glass. There's like 8 different layers of wrapping around a piece of glassware that's shipped. That was the really time consuming thing. And because we had that first person experience, that firsthand experience, we're able to say, man, if we had a warehouse, a staging ground, we could probably create massive amounts of efficiency in bringing these short-term units online. And then here's a list of our standardized list of things that we purchase. Here's the pizza pan. You can see we love Amazon. We love Costco. Those we try to have a small number of vendors. So if we need to return things, we need to manage vendor relationships, it's pretty easy. There were days when an entire UPS truck would be sent just for us, which is it's pretty cool to get that phone call because they'll call you and say, hey, we're sending an entire truck today, so you're gonna be there, right? We'd hate to send an entire truck just for you, and then there's no one there to unload it. So they would try hard to create an efficiency for us, right? Because there's now a mutual efficiency. If they can send an entire truck just for us, it's like way more efficient. That driver is going to spend way less time than running laps, delivering to multiple people. And now we get an entire UPS driver and say, hey, let's get the dollies going, let's get the lift going, let's get everything right exactly where we want it to be. We're able to receive those packages so much faster. They're able to deliver those packages so much faster. There's no upward limit to how much efficiency you can create when you do things at scale.
One of the questions that came in a little earlier is for your 1 to 2 bedroom units, how many estimated hours is someone spending putting the furniture for each unit? So after, launching 50 of these, the plan that we have is that there should be about 40 to 48 person hours allocated per unit. So that means when they receive the unit basically from like the long-term rental team and the unit's cleaned and turned, from that moment until the moment it's active on like the Airbnb platforms and the other platforms should be about 40 to 48 person hours of work. So not necessarily 1 week, because we might have, say, 4 people working on one unit to get it all launched in, a few days, but about 48 hours of human labor are needed for a 1 or 2 bedroom unit.
So here's some other ways we create efficiencies and optimizing our operations. So here's on the left here is a picture of a bag of a linens bag. So we quickly figured out that there's a huge pain point with pull-out couches with sleeper sofas, hide-to beds that people use the extra linens inappropriately. It's a different bed size than like the primary bed size. And so we had to be painfully obvious in how to use these linens. So every single sofa bed comes with one of these bags and it says labeled sofa sleeper bedding, zip tie, and we zip tie them shut. So you have to cut them open, which like luxury hotels do that. So it's really obvious if those linens have been used. So sometimes people like use the linens and put them back in the bag. We have to be incredibly specific about how we package those linens. What that means is we can be certain that the unit has fresh linens for that sofa, sleeper sofa.
And the guests can be certain.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
Which is that's what you want, is that
Yep.
feeling of psychological safety and comfort for your guests.
And it's very efficient for us to turn those over. So when a facility staff member goes to do the unit turn, they just bring one of those bags with them, and maybe they swap it out, maybe they don't. Just depends on whether or not it's been used. On the bottom right corner, we've got pictures of our laundry totes. So we've got a laundry facility that we've constructed at RDS, a massive, centralized laundry processing center. And every single bed has a tote. So a full sheet, blanket set, everything, it fits inside of one of these totes. And so when our facilities team members go out to turn over a unit, they know they need a sleeper sofa bag, and then maybe they need two queen totes. And they know that no matter what happens, they're going to have absolutely everything that they need. They take the dirty sheets off the bed, put it in the tote, take the clean sheets out of the tote, put it on the bed, and it's very quick to turn over those units. There's a tight time frame from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. when we need to turn over everything, even if we've got a very large number of turnovers, and we don't want our team wasting that really precious time during that critical interval trying to fold, sort, move laundry around. We want it to be effortless. And then these stackable inexpensive crates then fit on carts that are deployed to all the portfolios. So literally, someone might be kind of moving that laundry around, out of a vehicle. It goes into a cart, and in a minimal amount of time, they can transport it. And then finally, we have this FAQ. It's like a Wikipedia. So you can see there's 19 links to different Google Docs. We keep all of our documentation in Google Docs, so you can access it on your phone, on a computer, because our cleaners, they're using phones. They're probably not using computers when they're out cleaning. Our VAs can directly access it, and anyone can modify it if something needs to be changed or improved. So everything from, what keypad codes get you into what property, a team directory, you're at a property, you need something from someone, you need to know who to call, to listing information and what goes into like Guesty or Airbnb. If a guest says, hey, you guys said that this is a 2 bath, but it's only a 1.5 bath. Well, we need a really quick and easy way for someone to look up, well, what information do we actually put out there for that particular unit? So this is just a sampling of some of our, kind of documentation processes and what that physically looks like manifested. Literally every single day, we'll typically meet, every few weeks or so, and just meet, with our facilities people, say, what are your biggest pain points? What's slowing you down? What can we do to make your job easier? Or constantly innovating ways to make their job as easy, as streamlined as possible.
Lesson 5 was optimize for efficiency, and we showed you some of the ways that we're doing that. And hopefully, if you're running a short-term rental, you picked up a couple of things, like maybe it's the bags with the zip ties for your extra linens or something like that. But anything you can do to save a few minutes. It's not just that few minutes, it's that few minutes times all of your stays times however many years you plan to be in business. So optimization is just absolutely critical. That was lesson 5. 2 more lessons here in our 7-lesson series tonight. The next, lesson 6, is focus on the customer experience. So we talked some about that in our very first lesson about, real estate being hyper local and understanding the customer journey of the person who's coming to your market and their psychology and how they're spending their dollar, what their needs and desires are. And this lesson 6, is all about that customer experience. Short-term rental very much is, if you have a happy guest, you have a happy host, and
happy wife, happy life.
you're kind of so closely tied to that. That's true in long-term rental as well, but there's just a little more grace and give in a long-term rental. Say if a long-term rental has, say a leaky sink, they're okay if you come out and fix it, the next day. They understand that happens over the course of, a 1 or multi-year tenancy. They understand it's just, part of the living, breathing nature of residential real estate. But in a short-term rental, if there's, say, a leaky sink underneath a cabinet, that, could be catastrophic depending on the psychology of that particular guest. So really thinking about how to, preempt any problems, any concerns, thinking about, well, I understand exactly where to park, but what if I was flying into Rochester and my plane landed at midnight, which we learned through experience. There's a very large,
so many midnight check-ins.
So many midnight check-ins.
And they're so happy when they've been driving for 11 hours or on a plane all day and checking in at midnight, and they can't figure out where to park because it's dark outside.
Yep. So really thinking through, like, Nick and I went at midnight and drove these routes of we don't usually drive these routes at midnight, but what exactly does the sign look like? What are the, street lights that we can reference in our check-in instructions, all of those things. So thinking about the experience through their eyes, what's the exact button that you push on the keypad code, those sorts of things. Better reviews lead to repeat bookings, lead to referrals, and that leads to more profitability, more off-platform bookings, which then eliminates a lot of the Airbnb fees and those sorts of things, gives people more control. One of the questions that came in earlier was, do we have more property damage from short-term rentals as compared to long-term rentals? That was something that I was really afraid of. Nick kind of calls me like our chief risk officer at Black Swan. And one of the things that I love about long-term rental is, we have their driver's license, their social security number, their full background check, their landlord references, their banking information, a security deposit, all of those things. Well, you don't have as much of that data in the short-term rental world. We've not had any, negative experiences. We've had a few things that, kind of cost of doing business, of like damaged linens or those sorts of things. We've not had any, what I call like a train wreck turnover, where it's been, hundreds of dollars to repair things. And part of that is that, part of it is that we're in an environment where people are coming here for medical care. So it's just very, like, people aren't necessarily, drinking alcohol or having large parties or those sorts of things where, you might find in a typical vacation venue. But part of it is that we really try to get repeat bookings, because once we know that someone has been a good customer, chances are they'll be a good customer in the future. So it goes back to focusing on that customer experience and getting, good reviews, superhost status, all of those things. Invest in quality furnishings and amenities. I think you've heard, we don't have the most premium things. We have things that are, kind of Costco grade, Amazon grade. If you're in, a premium, 7-figure cabin home or mountain home or beach home, you probably would want things that are nicer than, say, where we are. We're competing with hotels. We're competing on price, but we try to have everything. We try to have way more pillows than you might expect, because maybe these people are in some sort of pain or post-surgery or something like that. We try to have way more linens, way more towels and washcloths, just kind of thinking that, maybe they're going through some sort of treatment where they're, showering more often or those sorts of things. We try to have everything in that kitchen that they might have in a home kitchen. So some Airbnbs just kind of have your basic, like, pot and pan and strainer, maybe you can make like some spaghetti or something like that. We try to have everything so that when we get more of that kind of like medium term booking, maybe someone's coming for a 6-week post-op period or a 8-week chemo course or something like that, they're going to want to cook different things. They're going to want to cook a pizza and, air fry a meal, or all of those different things. So we try to have a very, fully finished Airbnb product that is similar to, say, their personal home. And then having a really good customer service coverage experience. We thought long-term rental was a 24/7 operation.
We were mistaken.
We were mistaken. There's this like fantasy in long-term rental that there's just like all these emergencies in the middle of the night and those sorts of things. And to be clear,
2 a.m. toilet call.
Yeah.
I have never had a 2 a.m. toilet call, and we've been doing this for a while.
we've
We've
been
got
doing
a
it for
lot
a
of
long
this.
time. We have 1,000 units. We have a person who's on call 24/7, 365 in our long-term rental portfolio. And they do get calls, to be clear. A lot of things can wait till morning.
Mhm.
Even a lot of things, if they happen on a Saturday, can wait till a Monday morning. There's very few things that you truly have to like get out of bed and go handle. The short-term rental experience is very different. It is, and the expectation for response is very different.
Mhm.
In the long-term rental world, if we have, say, a 1-hour response time, the standard that we have set for our team for our long-term rental on-call is a 20-minute response time. When we call someone back within an hour, they're like, wow, I can't believe you're calling. Thank you so much. Like, yep, I can put a bucket under the sink and the plumber can come in the morning. In a short-term rental experience, for some people, an hour could be that you've like abandoned them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
The psychology is just very, very different. And so we've really had to hone in our customer service experience, bring in a whole virtual assistant team that has overlapping coverage that's truly 24/7.
The person with just hands hovering over the keyboard,
Just waiting for the text message.
20 hours a day. Yep.
Just waiting. Just waiting.
Yep.
But hit the star button, not the pound button, all of the things.
The international travelers were at 2 a.m. They don't get an instant response from us, so they call the police and there's a language barrier, and like just it's a very different experience. Things that we would never experience with our long-term rentals are very commonplace with our short-term rentals.
Yep. And now, as we have 50, hiring full-time dedicated staff that's there longer hours. So we'll now have coverage from about 7 in the morning until about midnight or so. Those, true like wee hours of the night will still continue to be handled by our on-call person and our virtual assistant team. And eventually when we get to say, 100 or 150, I don't know the number, but at some point we'll realize like, wow, we really need, that true overnight coverage as well with a person, physically there at, say, a desk or those sorts of things. So it's a different experience than the long-term rental experience. And we had to be, kind of going back to one of our other lessons of staying in curiosity, we had to be open to asking ourselves, what are the advantages we have from running a long-term rental portfolio for so many years, but then also what are our blind spots?
Yeah.
And how can we make sure that we're delivering the customer experience that this group of people is expecting with this particular service line? Somewhere later in the slides, I think we say like, short-term rentals are like a Tamagotchi that like kind of ages us a little bit. But the little like thing that you constantly had to be like pushing the buttons to like feed it and let it go to the bathroom and all, like that is the short-term rental experience. And we've just learned to lean into it and to be humored by it. And
we love our Tamagotchis.
And to know that if we want to have the reputation and the profitability and all of the things in our short-term rental portfolio that we have in our long-term rental portfolio, that we're gonna have to lean hard into that customer experience.
And here's the outcome from that. So we have a superhost status. We've achieved superhost status every quarter that we've been eligible, which is only
I think 3 quarters.
Yeah, 3 quarters. This is gonna sound crazy, but very few hosts in our area are superhosts. And I think it comes back to people are here for medical care. They're not here on vacation. So they're already in a pretty, frankly, sour mood, and it can be very easy for issues to escalate. So this really sets us apart, gives us a huge advantage in our market that we're one of the few hosts that are super hosts in our market. Keep in mind, if you're running an STR business, it's more than just investing in real estate. You are engaging in a service business. There's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's significantly more cash flow you can generate, but you need to make sure that the juice is worth the squeeze. For us so far, I think it has been. I think we've had really good outcomes, both financially and in terms of the maturity of our business. But just make sure you understand what you're getting into.
Some of the questions that came in that kind of fit into this part of the presentation are, do we allow pets? We do. So
pets allow themselves is what we figured out. People need a lot of emotional support animals when they're getting care, and nothing we can do would possibly keep the pets out. That's for sure.
Yep. So on the long-term rental side, we're the most pet-friendly property management company in town. And so we've just kind of carried that theming over into our short-term rental portfolio. All of our short-term rentals are in our apartment buildings. We don't have any single-family home short-term rentals at this time. So our apartment buildings already have like dog parks and, doggy stations with the bags and those sorts of things. It does lead to a higher cleaning burden. But we just kind of expect that there's going to be a pet in almost every stay. And then if it turns out there isn't a pet in that stay, then it's like a bonus of, oh, this one was a little easier to clean. But we find that it's almost like a non-negotiable that, so many people are bringing their pets, and just kind of surrendering to like, even if we said we weren't pet friendly, people are going to be bringing their pets, and then we're just going to be like fining them and then getting negative reviews and those sorts of things. So we are pet friendly. We've not had any damages in terms of like chewed trim or pet urine or those sorts of things, but there is just a
couple of rugs. That's about the worst I can.
Yeah, we have LVP, right? So we've built our whole portfolio around being pet friendly. So, our units have LVP, and that helps a ton. It just does lead to a little bit of a higher cleaning burden. Do we provide a hostess welcome pack? So we provide both ground coffee if someone wants to make a pot of coffee, and K-cups if they want a single cup or they want to, make sure that it's, completely sealed, those sorts of things. We have all of like the coffee creamers and the sugars and those sorts of things so that they can dress their coffee however they want. We have water. We have like couple of different types of oils, salt, pepper, a couple of different types of spices and those sorts of things.
Some hosts will leave like a bottle of wine or champagne.
We don't do that.
And we found that that could actually be really poorly received if someone is here getting, terminal care and there's a bottle of champagne waiting for them. That's just not something that they appreciate. So we found the best thing we can do is offer a really phenomenal cleaning experience and make sure they have a really well-equipped, clean, safe, easy to access room. That's really what people seem to want in our market.
Yep. So I would say we have kind of all of the things that you might expect in the kitchen. And then we try to have like, really high quality shampoos, body washes, those sorts of things. We have everything that they would need for their laundry, and we don't really have any limits on any of this. So we put out, I don't know, like 30 K-cups and a whole basket full of like their dishwasher pods or their laundry pods. We have like 12 or 15 towels in every one of our units, and we've not found that we've had any problems with that. We've not found, that people are like going through all of the towels or, using up all of the dishwasher pods or those sorts of things. But we want people to have that sense of, there's already just so much human scarcity when you're in a strange place getting really complex medical care, right? Like these people aren't coming because they, broke their leg. They're coming to get a second, third, fourth opinion. That we don't want them to have like even the hint of a feeling when they go to run the dishwasher of like, oh, this is my last pod. Am I hand washing dishes after this? Am I, messaging the host? Am I running to the store? So we just have plentiful of all of that.
But we don't replenish those things. So we get a lot of long stays. Our typical stay, I think, is like 31 days right now. So you got, more than enough for, many days, a week or whatever. But then the expectation is that you're replenishing your own paper products and everything. So we'll leave, a whole package of toilet paper. You've got half a dozen rolls of toilet paper. You've got 2 rolls of paper towels. Like, I don't know about you, but it takes me quite a while to go through 2 whole rolls of paper towels. But then we don't replenish anything once that's been deployed.
Yep. So good questions there for, kind of a welcome pack. How have we optimized supplies?
I just kind of segued us into that one.
Yeah. So I have found that we don't have a lot of waste there. It's probably because our average guest count is fairly low.
Yeah.
It might be like, the patient themselves and then 1 or 2 caregivers. So we don't have like very large parties where they're, like say they might be going through like multiple rolls of paper towels because they're hosting, 8 or 10 people or those sorts of things. We haven't really had any concerns like that. In the beginning,
we track it pretty carefully and we know what our consumption is pretty accurately.
Yeah, in the beginning, I tried to be much stricter with, let's put like 6 dishwasher pods and those sorts of things. And then I actually found that we weren't having problems with overuse, and it was cognitively demanding on our facilities team to like count dishwasher pods and count Tide pods and other things. So now it's like, just put the whole Tide pod container from Costco in there and it's going to be fine. And if, 1 every 2 months gets stolen, which I don't even think has happened, but I'm just kind of giving an example, like it's $20. The amount of time that we save from our facilities team not having to, replenish those things between every stays is worth whatever maybe excess might happen. But we haven't seen that in our market. And I do know that that's different from, so we've explained lots of ways that our market is different in terms of the psychology of our guests. And that's one of the ways that's different in a positive way. Our last lesson here, lesson 7, is it's so important. It was embedded in a different lesson, and then we have its own culmination lesson here. Lesson 7 is adapting to change is more important than following a plan.
So this is a screenshot of our Guesty software. It has our booking calendar. So this should give you some really good insight into just kind of what a typical booking situation looks like for us. We started out just working directly off Airbnb. Then we tried Owner Res. Then we did Guesty Lite or whatever it is. There's two versions of Guesty. And ultimately, we used Guesty for Pros as our kind of platform to manage our units. And the killer app, the killer feature, the reason we use Guesty for Pros is that it supports multi-unit. So we can have, if you look in the bottom half of that, you can see RDS 2.1. So there's actually half a dozen 2-bed, 1-bath units at RDS that's underneath a single Airbnb listing. And it's extraordinarily valuable because when a booking comes in, like if you go look there's a booking kind of bottom center there for Patty. If we only had a one-to-one, relationship between our unit on the platform and the listing in Airbnb, now it's utterly impossible for us to rent to get a long booking for Huda, for Kyle, for any of these other people. You can see we get a lot of long bookings because it will automatically stack up all those short bookings, and that allows us to get these long bookings that are extraordinarily lucrative for us. So in the top kind of section there, you can see those are single units, and in the bottom section, you can see it's a multi-unit. You can see that we have way longer stays. There's more long stays in that bottom portion than there in the top portion. So our one-to-one units, they have like a 85% occupancy rate, and our multi-units, they have like a 97% occupancy rate, extraordinarily high occupancy rate, which makes a ton of sense because they're able to kind of Tetris together all those bookings. There's a huge number of additional advantages. So you now have a constant stream of reviews. If you just have a one-to-one, and particularly like if you get a bad review and then you have a long stay after it, so you don't get another review for a while, you get hammered by the Airbnb algorithm. And it can be really difficult to kind of claw your way back up to the top. Whereas with the multi-unit, if you get a bad review, you're probably going to have a bunch more good reviews come in. And, because when you click on the Airbnb listing, it'll show you like the most recent reviews, right? So you can never have a bad review that's kind of lingering there for a long time. And the way the Airbnb algorithm works is if you have recent bad reviews, it's devastating. We never planned any of this. We didn't even know that this multi-unit thing was a feature. We thought that we were going to do bespoke rooms where each room had different furnishings and is like a different theme.
We were gonna do like different lakes of Minnesota.
Yeah, the Superior room and the Huron room. And we thought we were going to have these really ultra luxurious rooms too that have the best furnishings money can buy and stuff. Because in general, I would say we tend to occupy a premium space in the market. But we just put experiments out there and saw what the data revealed. And the data revealed that people want to pay about $100 a night. And as long as you meet a minimum quality standard, people are happy with it. And people ultimately need flexibility.
Tons
No one is
of
planning their trip
flexibility.
to Rochester 6 months in advance. People just found out that they are very sick and they need medical care next week, and they need a place where they can stay for a day and then for a week and then for months at a time. And if you can't accommodate that traveler pattern, it's very hard to operate a profitable business in this market with our specific pattern of data and our customers' needs when you walk that customer's journey. So basically we're going to get to our refi on RDS here in October, and then we're probably going to shut down every single one of our single units at RDS. We're going to unfurnish all of those units and switch to all multi-units because the multi-units have been just so much more successful than the single units. So I hope you can see like you just have to set your ego aside. Like you can make some good guesses, you can look at the data, but until you've conducted experiments at scale, you really don't know what it's like. You don't know what it's going to be like operating your business, growing your business, running your business, and just lean into what the market demands. If you truly are dedicated to serving people's needs, the world will pave a path to your door and pay you handsomely for it. This is going to be an extraordinarily lucrative line of business when we get rid of all these single units. That wasn't the plan. We are so far askew from what our original vision was for it, but we're just going where the market is telling us to go.
One of the questions that came in earlier, Stacy, I hope you're still on the call, is any concerns about wear and tear at such high occupancy rates? Some people shoot for higher, dollar amounts per night in exchange for lower occupancy. And I was waiting for this slide to answer that question because you'll see in our single units, if you're looking at the screen, those smaller green bars, those are single night stays. And you can see there's a lot of them on that upper half of the picture here, but on the lower half, those stays are quite long. So our occupancy rate is very, very high, but our turn is relatively, these may not even be classified as short-term rentals in a lot of people's minds. For us, anything that's 30 days or less, we classify as a short-term rental. And then anything beyond that, we try to get them onto our long-term rental lease. So even though our occupancy is very high, our wear and tear on the units is quite low because of these long booking stays. So I wanted to answer that question when there was a visual to go with it.
And Jenny and Mark just asked, not sure what you mean by multi-units. So for our multi-units in Guesty, in our platform, there can be many, in this case, 2-bed, 1-bathroom units at the residence at Discovery Square building. So just like when you go to book a room at a hotel, you don't book a specific room. You book like a 2-queen room or a one king suite or whatever. There's like a class of room, but you don't have an expectation that you're booking in a specific room. So normally in Airbnb, it's a one-to-one relationship. You're booking a unit 101. But Guesty is a somewhat unusual product in the marketplace that it has the ability to map multiple units in our apartment building, multiple identical units in our apartment building to a single listing in Airbnb. And that allows us to dilute our bad reviews. It allows us to, dynamically assign bookings to optimize our occupancy. So remember, we had this crazy thing where we just could not push ADR no matter what we did, no matter how nice it was. Our ADR, it was like $100 a night. So we said, what can we do to push occupancy? And it turned out we were able to ratchet up occupancy from 75% to 97%. And our ADR actually did go up. It's still right around that $100 a night. But we just said, here's what the data is telling us. Here's what the market is telling us. People want to pay $100 a night, and they don't really care too much about where exactly they stay. They just want to stay in a place that is a 2-bed, 2-bath, or that's a 1-bed, 1-bath. And so we're going to give the market the product that they're asking for.
Basically, like we're running, hotel rooms inside of our apartment buildings as opposed to individual stays where people stay. Say the exact opposite is our experience at Old City Hall, where we have one used to be the district attorney's office, and it has this like beautiful wood like art all around and those sorts of things. The other was the city council chamber, so it has like 30-foot ceilings with 20-foot windows. Those are very bespoke, unique products. If someone books, say, city council, they don't necessarily want to be in the vault unit, which is a basement level unit. But in RDS, if they book a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, they want to know that they're in that building because they're planning their like travel and walking days around that. And they want to know that they have, the sleeping arrangements and the bathroom arrangements that they want, but they don't care if they're on the 3rd floor or the 4th floor. The same as, your experience might be checking into a Hilton or a Hyatt or those sorts of things. And then we furnish them all exactly the same. And then, you saw in the, when we talked about optimizing operations, that then helps with, taking those totes and those sorts of things. So that's what the question is for multi-units. Another question is, do we own these buildings? Yes. So we own somewhere in the Black Swan portfolio. Everything that we're talking about is owned by Black Swan. Very good. Next up, the lesson inside of adapting to change is more important than following a plan is the sub-lesson scale fast.
Yeah. So this is something I think people don't understand. They think that it's easier to scale slow than it is to scale fast, but it's actually really important to scale quickly. You don't want to own a small business for a long period of time. There's a great saying in the entrepreneurship world that small businesses don't work, small business owners work. So you recall that I mentioned until you get to $1 million in revenue in pretty much any line of business, like you don't really have a business. You've got a side hustle that's going really well, or you've got, a day job where you're working your heart out and you're doing great. I mean, if you've got $700,000 in rev, amazing, but there's a good chance you don't have a business. You don't have a reproducible set of people and processes that are able to create value and generate profit on a recurring basis. So whether you realize it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, the moment you have a small business, you're on a race against the clock. You're on a race against your own burnout. You can only hustle so hard for so long before you just give up. And so you have to scale that business quickly and get it to a size to millions of dollars of revenue where you can have a team of people to run that business before you give up. And we've seen this story over and over again. We're in the business of buying businesses, and that is the fact of the matter. So your proof of concept, make sure it goes well. Funnel those profits into growing that business, and then grow that business as fast as you possibly can until you get to millions of dollars in revenue, to get to $10 million in revenue. And then you've got a really, really lucrative, powerful, saleable business. Scale big. So you're funneling all that profit into growth. Don't get too clever. Don't get too creative. Stop being an artist if you can possibly help yourself. Find something that works really well, and then just keep doing it. We stumbled onto this whole multi-unit thing in Guesty, and we're printing money with it, and we're gonna keep printing money as long as that printer runs. Gary Keller is something that I really love. He says it is the undoing of most entrepreneurs to get bored with what works. So please do not get bored with what works as an entrepreneur, and that might be a short-term business, or it could be any business. it should get easier the more you grow if you're doing it right. And if it's getting harder as you grow, you need to step back and say, okay, how can we improve our efficiencies so that things get easier as we grow? And then scaling fast and scaling big, it should be really exciting. It should be really fun, and it should get easier as you grow big.
Absolutely. Should we do a little drum roll?
Yeah. So what does it look like for us to scale this thing in a big way?
Here we go.
Yeah. It'd be to buy the Berkman. So the Berkman is it's the most valued apartment building in the state of Minnesota. Is the largest single asset transaction in state history. It's right across from St. Mary's. Sold for $190 million. That's one building for $190 million. So very nice building. And one of the reasons why it sold for so much is because it runs a hospitality operation. So it's part luxury apartment building, part luxury hotel. And there is no way that we could ever purchase the Berkman if we did not have a hospitality line of service as one of our verticals. So, practice like you're going to play. We'd like to own this building. I think that would be fun. And I'd like to make money doing it. And there's no way we could ever buy that building or make money owning it if we did not first have a hospitality line of business. How likely is that we'll own the Berkman? Actually, now that I say that, I think it is pretty likely. But
It's only a matter of time.
but just dream big, and it will drive you forward. A compelling vision will pull you forward in a way that, like, let's say you have 23 STRs and you want to bring number 24 online. It's not very motivating to do that. But to say we need 1,000 of them before we can buy the Berkman, well, that's a very compelling of the future that pull you forward.
So the Berkman is this building that's, right under the letters, the Berkman in the foreground of the picture, and then in the background, that kind of, darker cream colored building, that is the Mayo Clinic. So it is, literally in the shadow of the Mayo Clinic, that if you're looking at the screen in kind of the middle right-hand side of the screen, there's that like half dome. That's the car line that people are coming in to be dropped off at the Mayo Clinic. So, you've seen our maps, that we want to have as much real estate that's as physically adjacent to the Mayo Clinic as possible. The Berkman is as close as it possibly gets. It is only, separated by, crossing the street. And there's no way that we could acquire it if we didn't have this hospitality experience. But let's get closer to home. Let's get, something that we actually own, that we already have a plan for. That
Which is right across the street from the Berkman.
Yeah, it's very, very close. That is Colby. So Colby is owned 100% by Black Swan Real Estate Fund 2. It is, one of the least nice properties in our portfolio. It's a 1960s, sort of motel style 32 unit apartment community in horrible physical condition. When we acquired it, we've done enough renovations that it's good, safe, clean living, but it's certainly nothing luxurious. The units themselves are very, very small. They're, kind of like studio type units. So you might ask yourself, like, man, why did you guys buy that in Fund 2? Like, the other assets you bought in Fund 2 were categorically completely different. And we bought this with a plan to redevelop it. So the plan had always been to buy it, to stabilize it physically so that people could live there comfortably and safely and have an experience that we were proud to put our Black Swan name on, but never to renovate it, fully to the way we typically renovate, because the plan is this will be a knockdown redevelopment that will build a building kind of similar to Berkman. And we've been working with the architect and the engineers. We had our soil borings, just like
Last week.
a week or so ago.
Last Monday.
It's a huge milestone in the redevelopment of a site so that you can, make sure that your soil corrections have happened and that they can support the load and all of those things. We would not be able to, let me say it this way, it would be far less likely that we could profitably redevelop the Colby site if we didn't have the expertise of running a portion of that future apartment building as a short-term rental, because it drastically increases the overall revenue, and more importantly, it drastically decreases vacancy. Vacancy is a huge thing that you always need to be thinking about if you're running a multifamily portfolio. And kind of something that we haven't quite, woven into here that's, maybe a less applicable to, someone that's listening, because you're probably not also running a huge long-term rental portfolio. But for us, we think of it as, we have all of these units that we need to fill in some revenue generating way. And now we essentially have two huge lead funnels.
Mhm.
So we have our like Zillow, apartments.com, long-term rental, all of those leads are coming in. And then we have our Airbnb, booking.com, direct booking, all of those leads are coming in. And then we fill our units and generate revenue that way. So we need that second source of revenue in order to profitably redevelop the Colby site. I'm sure you've heard that, new construction is very expensive right now. There's all sorts of headwinds in the industry. And so if you can find a way to drastically increase your revenue, then particularly because real estate is valued based off of NOI and capitalization rate, it can make the building, literally millions or even tens of millions of dollars more profitable than if we didn't have that line of business. I'm sure you want to add.
I'm trying to move as fast as I can, but yeah, we'd put in a large, laundry processing facility. We put in a huge front desk lobby, a luxury seating lounge. We'd put in a portico for people to park and unload their luggage. And then, city code allows us to go up to 25% of the units as short term. So we would just architect, 25% of the units to be luxury 2-bed, 2-bath penthouses that would get us the best possible outcome for every square footage of rental property that we have available. So if we can't buy the Berkman, we're just going to build the next best thing next door.
Absolutely.
And it's not just this goes back to that idea of your greatest cost, your opportunity cost, and the loss of failing to start. It's not that $2,700 a month from that first unit 9 months ago. The greatest loss is the $50 million building that we couldn't build because we didn't have the line of business that could profitably operate it. So,
Absolutely. And at Real Estate Real Life last year, we just drove through the parking lot. We were under contract on Colby. So we're like, hey, you see that like really ugly building over there? We're going to buy it. It's hard to explain why, but we'll tell you the whole story
we've
soon.
got some ideas.
And then this year we were able to show the units that are renovated. There's basically like, PhD postdocs are kind of living there. It's a really lovely community. And then have the plans that we're working with the architect of the renderings of the future building that will be on this site. We're still working out all of that. We don't have anything, set in stone yet, but we did our soil borings and we're moving forward.
They're good initial results in the borings too.
Another thing that actually happened, right? So we talked about Berkman and how that's aspirational. We brought that home to Colby and how that is an asset owned in Fund 2 and the future value that will come from the redevelopment of that site. Another thing that we've actually done with this experience is acquired the Viking House.
That just about anyone on this call could do. So this was a not super sexy property that was in use as a short-term rental. And there's just no way it made financial sense for us to buy it as an operational asset as a long-term, but it made sense as a short-term. So we already owned the 3 buildings in that green box there, but we did not yet own that triplex in the red box, and we didn't own it because we didn't have a short-term line of business. And now we own it. In fact, Black Swan Real Estate Fund 3 owns it.
Correct.
Yep. Black Swan Real Estate Fund 3 owns that. And so we now own half a city block, and it's probably one of the most valuable pieces of dirt in all of Rochester because about $3 billion of Hospital of the Future campus is going in a perimeter around the city block. So we're really glad that we own that half city block, and it's just going to unlock amazing things for the future. If you develop this expertise, you could go buy a triplex somewhere and operate it very profitably, I suspect.
Let's talk about RDS. That's owned by Fund 1 and Fund 2.
So we had a problem to solve with RDS, which is we had a big finance event coming up here in October when we were doing a huge construction project, adding a ton of units to it. Well, it takes time to fill those units with long-term rental, unfurnished rental. It's a lucrative line of business. It's lower touch, it's lower operational expense, but it takes time to do a lease up to fill those units. One of my favorite things about short-term rental is that, man, oh man, does it produce revenue fast. So you can see there, we brought a unit online there on that day where it says $91. Then we had to block it to show that unit to the bank because the bank had to sign off on the construction loan and everything because we got our certificate of occupancy. So we had to block it for 48 hours for the bank to tour it. And then we had a booking for, for the hour, literally like the bankers are walking out of the unit as the first guest is checking in. So we're able to deliver massive amounts of revenue at Residence Discovery Square. We were producing like $20,000 of revenue in March, and we produced $99,500 in revenue last month. So
so
just-
close to six figures.
that's why I remember the number, because it's just off of six figures.
Painful.
That's right. So just like we brought a ton of new units. We had a multi-million-dollar construction project adding units to the building, and those units started producing revenue instantly. So we could use that revenue to count towards our new financing here for October. So again, just going back to the idea that just be agile and respond to change and respond to what the market demands. It was never quite on my radar that these STRs produce a lot of revenue quickly, that there's not a lag time to that revenue. But as we started spinning up units, it's like, dang, if you could spin up like 20 units at once, you could produce a crazy amount of revenue within days of bringing those units online. So how could we figure out how to bring a bunch of units online to take advantage of that very compelling feature of short-term rentals? So there's huge advantages and disadvantages to this, and what can we do to play to those advantages and mitigate those disadvantages?
So we had a day in the company where literally everyone, I'm talking like our accountants, everybody, we were all out there unboxing stuff, folding towels, putting together furniture. It was super fun. Like some people are like, I usually like work behind a computer, and we're like, you can unbox glassware, I promise. You can make a bed, I promise.
We had a blast.
We had a ton of fun. It was such a team building experience. We had coffee and pizza and all sorts of things. And we brought, you tell me how many. I think we brought like 15 units online in like a 4-day period.
So we got them principally furnished. Getting those units online, getting that last 5% is everything. And the worst thing you could do is bring on a unit that's not 100%. You get some bad reviews. So it took, probably another day per unit to get those units online or something like that. Or
Get
maybe
that last polish.
yeah, maybe a couple units per day or something like that. But we got all the furniture into the unit, got the furniture assembled, got 90 to 95% of it done on the majority of those units.
And it was super fun.
Yeah.
It was so fun. All right, so those are our 7 principal lessons. We have real estate is hyperlocal, be counter-cyclical, be data-driven. Optionality is everything. Optimize for efficiency, focus on the guest experience, and then adapting to change is so much more important than following a plan. We have a few questions here that we'll get to that we haven't answered yet, but we have a couple of bonus lessons. I had to say, Nick, like, we're not going till midnight. I'm 30 something weeks pregnant. No one wants to stay up with us till midnight. So we have to, he's like, can we do 16 lessons? And Rachel and I nearly fainted.
80% of everyone's still here, like 2 hours in. So I think they're getting some value out of this.
So we indulged him this slide.
They call those lightning rounds. We already talked about how SDR management's like a Tamagotchi. You just have fun with it. It's high touch. It's very demanding. It's consistent. It's persistent. Just have fun with it. I think that SDR is a popular investment vehicle because most long-term management is atrocious, frankly. So SDR facilitates self-management in a way that it's actually easier to manage a short-term rental yourself. I think that is easier to self-manage a long-term rental, particularly if it's far away. My observation is that SDR definitely lends itself well to investing out of state than long-term rental does. STR generates way more revenue than LTR, but STR produces a lot more noise, and it has way higher operational expense, staggeringly higher. So I would say it's unclear to me exactly what the profit differential is. We're ahead on the difference, but it's unclear to me just how far ahead we come out. If the STRs are a break even and all they do is generate a massive amount of leads to fill our LTRs, it's worth it for us. But in our experience, STR is on the net less profitable than I guess we thought it might be. It's not like it's 10x the profit. It's an extra at best in our best properties, an extra $500 per unit per month net. Now in LTR, if you're cash flowing $100 per unit per month, you're doing great. So if you get an extra $500 per unit per month, that's a ton of money. But it's also a lot of touch. It has an impact on the culture of the building. There's there's some drawbacks to go with it. we want to point out that STR, it lowers your options for lending, particularly for multifamily properties. So you can't necessarily go get a Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or HUD loan on that property. That's a pretty big deal, especially on big properties like Residence at Discovery Square. It reduces the number of people that will potentially purchase your property. So if you're thinking about selling an asset and you're operating as an STR and you want to sell it furnished with a list of bookings and stuff, that has value to it, but it also reduces your buyer pool, and you may or may not necessarily come out ahead on the difference. And then SCR, it's very noisy, and without a doubt, it has opened up some growth areas for us, like buying that triplex, like redeveloping the Colby, or one day buying the Berkman. But no doubt, if we had taken, I mean, Elaine and I have personally put hundreds of hours into launching this line of business. If we had spent that same time on something else, we probably could have bought several more apartment buildings. And your greatest cost is your opportunity cost. So what's your opportunity cost in your life? You can only do so many things. So there's definitely cost to running STRs. I've been blown away by how different our outcomes have been at each asset. They're all just a completely different animal. It's like they are in different cities. I mentioned that STR lends itself well to remote management. People are accustomed to the owner being remote. They're accustomed to electronic communication methods, whereas you're accustomed to kind of meeting your landlord face to face. It lends itself well with the way cleaners work, that you kind of have some boots on the ground built into STR. And it lends itself well to VAs. So we had to build out a whole core of VAs. Just it's interesting. People's expectations is almost like they expect to get an instant response from a VA. Maybe not a high quality response, but an instantaneous response. I would say that my biggest concern about the STR line of business is that we are quite beholden to Airbnb. If our Airbnb account was suspended, that would be a seven-figure kind of devastating situation for us. We're getting big enough that we almost can be eligible for a personal rep, account rep with Airbnb. At that point, it's almost impossible that our Airbnb account could be suspended, but it could happen today if we get the wrong tenant from hell that threatens to sue Airbnb or something. Airbnb very likely could suspend our account. And that would be, beyond devastating to our line of business. I perceive this to be the worst thing about the short-term rental line of business, is that really, Airbnb in most markets is kind of the only player. It's not viable to contemplate running a business if you don't, if you're not on Airbnb in almost every market. That's a pretty big problem. And then whatever you can do to build your own platform to generate direct bookings, it's absolutely everything in this line of business.
How do I pull up the data for bookings?
I'll pull it up right now. So I wish I could tell you that we just have amazing direct bookings for everything that we do, and that's not yet the case. And I don't have any reason to believe that it will really ever be the case. So here are I'm sorry, over here is where you can see it. There we go. So if I go look at the last week, that's just what came up automatically. Airbnb was 87% of our bookings. So we're actually getting more bookings through Airbnb than in the past. And then booking.com was 10%, so double the prevalence of booking.com. Our booking website was a measly 2%, and direct booking was 1%. So frankly, an atrocious week for our direct booking website. If we go back a month, what do those numbers look like? Okay.
That's a little better.
So, I quoted 80% was Airbnb. There's 79%. So I'm glad I do actually have a grip on the numbers there. Direct booking was 10%. So more in line with, I think these are like almost 5% for booking.com. So I think these are the exact numbers that I mentioned there. This is still not great. 80% of your revenue coming from one source. And frankly, Airbnb is outright hostile to hosts. Hosts are a necessary evil to Airbnb doing business. And that's not a good business partner to have. So that's what that looks like for us. And it's something that, like, we'd already have 100 units right now if it wasn't for this problem. Like this is, do we really want to go build a $50 million apartment building if we're building it on someone else's platform? That's a scary thing. Once we get a personal account rep with Airbnb, at that point, you're pretty well assured it's impossible your account will get suspended, but you're still pretty beholden to them. That's for sure. So
those are our lessons. We have a couple questions here that we will answer. And then just a final mention that Fund 4 is open, blackswanfund4.com, if you'd like to invest alongside us in the funds and the assets that we have in Fund 4. let's go ahead and stop our screen share and do some questions.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions that we didn't get to during the presentation. Do we charge tax? So yes. Why'd you say it so forcefully?
Just yes.
Yep. So, we have to be in compliance with Minnesota law and Olmsted County and lodging tax and all of those things. The nice thing is inside of Guesty, obviously it's like collected right inside of Airbnb, and then Guesty, it's, kind of all built right in there, even for our direct bookings. So it hasn't been a lot of additional like operational challenge or accounting challenge for us, but it's absolutely critical, for anyone, but particularly for a business of our scale. That we're absolutely, in compliance with everything that's required for tax law and those sorts of things. Another question was, does Mayo refer guests to you? Yes, as of like maybe
Month ago?
just gonna say like 2 weeks. Yeah. Stephanie, our director of operations, who many of you know or even have met in person from, say, Real Estate Real Life or other things, secured a spot at Mayo where we're like one of their like official, referral partners.
It's a really big deal. It's
A
not
huge
simple
deal
to get on that list.
we're mentioned, and you basically have to have, a certain reputation and a certain longevity in the community.
Hard
and those sorts of
requirements,
things.
like someone has to pick up the phone in so many rings. You have to have a certain amount of availability. You have to have ADA units. Like they have a lot of criteria before they will allow a patient to pick up the phone and call you. I don't know if we've actually gotten a booking from that yet. That's
like hot off the presses.
Yeah.
That's like just a couple of weeks old that
we might still be in the pipeline for that process.
we got that.
Yeah.
Have you considered doing short-term rentals in another market like our Tacoma properties? So we do have some short-term rentals in our Tacoma portfolio, nowhere near the amount that we have in our Rochester portfolio. Partially because our Rochester portfolio is like 3 times older than our Tacoma portfolio. So if you just think about kind of like human development, our Rochester portfolio is like a young adult, and our Tacoma portfolio is like an adolescent. So we're still just like raising that portfolio and building out our operational pipeline there around long-term rental and finalizing some really major construction projects, those sorts of things. And then the other thing is that Rochester is a tourist town. Tacoma gets some tourism, but it's not like Seattle proper, right? Where people are coming for, Pike's Place or, the hiking and those sorts of things. So we have some there. I think we have maybe 10 or 12.
Yep. So we've got kind of a couple at each property. So we've just kind of test marketed to see what we get. We get a lot of midterm rentals. Our ADR has been solid. Our occupancy has been near 100%. We've had good outcomes, not amazing outcomes, I would say, like we've had in Rochester. We end up doing long-term furnished leases pretty often. That's a whole other topic we could dive into at a separate time. But one of the most lucrative things that have come out of all this, like the STRs aren't that profitable on the net for the amount of work that goes into it. But I know in the last month alone in Rochester, we have signed $100,000 of furnished leases, of furnished long-term leases. Those are unbelievably lucrative leases. So I think it's like 3 different leases. Each lease is about 35 grand. So we charge, like a $600 to $1,000 per month markup for, like a full service furnished unit on a 12-month basis. So all that management touch goes away. There's the cost of spinning up the unit, and you kind of need to have a pipeline to create them and then a pipeline to ingest them after that person leaves, right? So you kind of have to have this short-term business in order to get those. And we now advertise those on all the portals. So if you go to like apartments.com, you'll see, 3,000 a month for a furnished unit or whatever, for a long-term furnished unit. So literally, if it was just all break even on our STRs, but we could go crank out $100,000 a month in furnished leases, whew, that's worth it right there. So that's what that's looked like in Tacoma, and it's been very successful there. I don't know if we'll ever push it as hard as we're pushing in Rochester.
The next question is thoughts on financing for individuals getting started and scaling. So, as with anything in real estate, whether you're thinking of a long-term rental portfolio or a short-term rental portfolio, In general, in the beginning, you probably want to go for a conventional loan. Those are the easiest to get approved. They're usually, 30-year amortization, 30-year term. They tend to have the lowest interest rates. Probably have experience with that if you're a homeowner yourself. So you go through that route. And even things like your, 10-bedroom, 8-bath, beach home, those sorts of things, those will qualify for conventional financing. Any individual can have 10 conventional mortgages. A married couple can have 20 if they each individually qualify for 10. I've not really seen many married couples, even if they're both really high income earners, that truly can get 20 conventional mortgages. But in general, you want to get as many conventional mortgages as you can. And then you're going to hit some sort of roadblock. It's almost certainly going to be your debt to income ratio. Even if you're a very high income earner, real estate has, relatively thin cash flow margins. And so you'll hit that barrier. It may be other things around, underwriting or whatever. Conventional loan underwriting is literally they're putting your information into like a spreadsheet in a software system. And so when that software like breaks under the weight of your complexity, you just no longer qualify for conventional financing. And then you need to make the leap into commercial financing. And we have on our YouTube channel, one of our previous community power hours was about conventional and commercial financing. Maybe Rachel can pull that up and throw that into chat. But if you're listening to the replay, just go and search Black Swan Real Estate Commercial Lending, and you'll find that historic community power hour. And that's actually a lot easier in a lot of ways, because commercial lending is all about relationships. It's all about you selling yourself as a borrower to a bank. You want to work with local regional banks in the area where the property is. So if you're a remote short-term rental owner, you wouldn't get a local regional bank where you live. You'd get a local regional bank where the property is. But you sell them on who you are as a person, what your education is, what your professional experience is, what management or leadership experience you have, what business experience you have, what real estate experience you have, what your vision is for that property. If you have other pieces of property, which you probably do, right? If you're going into commercial lending, you probably have a few properties that you've acquired with a conventional mortgage. So you have that historic track record to share with the banker. And the beautiful thing about commercial lending is that it's all a story. It's all a relationship. And that's really what allows people to scale from, say, 6 units to, the sky is the limit. Everything that we have in our portfolio is all commercial lending. So like when Nick and I started with our own capital, over a decade ago, we were getting conventional mortgages. When we maxed that out, we made the leap to commercial lending, and then commercial lending covers your, 20, 50, $100 million apartment building. So you just have to kind of break into that world. It's actually easier than it seems. And then once you're in that world, you'll get, really good at it, and that will allow you to scale. And then they don't look at things like debt to income ratio and those sorts of things. They really analyze each individual loan separately, sort of thinking of it more of like a business loan than a mortgage. Like, is this business, i.e. this real estate, going to produce enough income to pay its own mortgage?
For new construction, would you still expect the $100 ADR, or do you think you could tap into different clientele? So the data says no. The data says it's $100 a night. As much as that drives me crazy, our at the Riverview, which is like a solid B class building, we get materially similar rents to RDS, which is a solid A class building. So if we were to build some like A plus units, I think it's still $100 a night. As much as that drives me crazy, maybe there's a clientele that we haven't yet discovered, and we're gonna do some experiments. We're gonna at some point we'll fire up a single family home, like a 4-bed that sleeps 10 people or something. At some point, we should take like our least nice building, like the Colby. We have a furnished unit for an employee there right now, temporary housing, and we should probably throw that one on Airbnb and see, is it still $100 a night even at the Colby? Because if it is, the Colby's going 100% furnished.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah. So unfortunately, I have zero data to support the supposition that if we build a really nice building that we'll get a much higher rental rate. As much as that kills me, that's just counter to the data that we have.
Yeah, and if you think about, the Hilton Mayo Clinic, which is the #1 rated Hilton in all of North America, I believe this is the 3rd year in a row that they've won that designation, which is the only time that has ever happened in Hilton brand history. You can get a room there for $169. So like that's that's like the nicest place to stay in Rochester with, the beautiful atrium and the premium restaurant and, all of the beautiful features that come with the most luxurious Hilton in North America. So that's kind of our, upper bar. Now, obviously we have kitchens and laundry and those sorts of things, but we always need to have that in mind, right? That thinking of the experience of someone that's coming to Rochester, they're probably going to think things like some of the major hotel brands, right? Your Hilton, your Hyatt, your Marriott. And then they might think, I need a little extra space. I don't necessarily want to share, a two queen with my mom for 5 days. It'd be nice if we had like two separate bedrooms, those sorts of things. And then they pop over to Airbnb, but they've been conditioned by that pricing in the market.
Yep.
Good question there. Is it cheaper to book direct?
Yes, it is. We offer a discount, and we offer a discount code for the frequent flyers, playing off the Black Swan theme thing. We have Black Swan themed things everywhere, so we've got a literal frequent flyer discount code. So it is always cheaper to book direct, slightly cheaper than Airbnb.
Yep, and all those fees and such are eliminated.
Yep, so we make more money, and the guest saves money when they book direct.
Yep. Out of curiosity, in my market of 30-day minimum rentals, I've noticed a shift from Airbnb to VRBO. I've used predominantly 95% Airbnb and about 5% inquiries from VRBO, and it has reversed. Any insight on that, or do you think that's a local observation?
So we're working on onboarding with VRBO right now. We worked with VRBO when we first, launched our first, string of units. And then we figured out that, 95% of our bookings were just coming from Airbnb. Booking.com was much more popular than than VRBO. And it was still, as you saw in the analytics, it was 85% Airbnb, 10% Booking.com, that's the distribution that we've seen. And this is a really critical concept. So when you're scaling fast, you need to keep things simple. And so we actually scaled back the number of platforms that we're on because each additional platform adds so much complexity. And we quickly latched onto this thing where the Airbnb multi-units, they were the most profitable thing that we had done. So let's just get that dialed in. And now we're kind of circling back around. So I have multiple emails in my inbox right now where our person that manages all the platforms and stuff is working on getting us on board with VRBO. And now we have like a dedicated account rep. So hopefully we can kind of like do it right, get fully onboarded, be able to do those multi-units in VRBO, which requires setting up some custom connections and stuff like that. But we're optimistic. We want to get on Google, which is also like somewhat complex, but I think Google might have some pretty good traction here. And then like Expedia is actually a really popular source of leads, but they tend to be international in nature. So there's always language barriers and cultural barriers. And so it's a complex clientele to serve. So it's a lucrative clientele, but it's a complex clientele to serve. And so we have to try our best to just keep things simple. And so that's what we've done right now. And then this winter, we're going to get rid of our single units, get more multi-units. We're going to scale out to other platforms, figure out, can we serve Expedia clientele? And so it's encouraging to hear that things are moving in that direction because we sure hate Airbnb. They're horrible.
We love Airbnb.
Please don't ban us, Airbnb. That'd be really bad for us if you did.
The technology piece in short-term rental is huge, right? So we can have, multiple different lead sources in long-term rental, but they all kind of funnel into either an email or a phone call, right? They expect to do a showing, to sign a lease, all of those sorts of things. But having all these integrations to make sure that, the check-in message with the code and the formatting and all of that gets to you, whether you've booked on Airbnb or directly on our site or on Booking.com or say VRBO when we bring that in, is so complex because it's all automated, which you might think actually makes it easier, but the formatting changes or the type of information that you can put into that, say welcome message or those sorts of things is a little bit different. And so that's something that, has been a learning curve for us because, on the long-term rental side, we can have things on Zillow and apartments.com and Facebook Marketplace. And we have QR codes around town with like local marketing that go into our own website, those sorts of things. But they really all funnel into an email or a phone call. And so rolling out all of those different tech integrations at an appropriate pace that it doesn't lead to a poor customer service experience that like we think they're getting the check-in message because it's all set up on Airbnb, but on a different platform, it's, the message is truncated or looks wonky or something like that. That's been a very steep learning curve. I'm so grateful you have all this tech experience so that I don't have to deal with it.
And they all compete with each other viciously. So Airbnb has taken to messaging us here in the last few weeks, where they have noticed that our units are advertised on other platforms, and they'll reach out and be like, hey, we noticed that the unit you have on our platform is slightly cheaper on booking.com. What's going on there? Like, it's just a really creepy, interesting conversation to have with Airbnb. Like, we're allowed to advertise our places on our units on other platforms, but they really don't like it. And they want to make sure that they have the highest quality listing at the best possible price. So it's a very interesting, I don't know. We've never had Zillow reach out to us and say, hey, we see you've got the unit also advertised on apartments.com and it's a little bit cheaper. What's going on there, buddy? That's never a conversation we've had in 15 years of long-term rental.
And then our last question is, as a percentage, what is the upcharge for furnished versus unfurnished? I assume you mean on the mid or long-term rental. I would say 50%.
So
you can go from like 2,000 to 3,000.
We've tried a bunch of different permutations here, and we have not really mastered the pricing thing. What we're doing right now is, if you want a long-term lease on a vacant unit that's not furnished, we'll furnish that unit for you for $600 per month if it's a year-long lease, or $1,000 a month if it's less than a year lease. But it has to be at least 4 or 6 months or something like that. And the logic is basically behind all that is, if I could snap my fingers and we just had like 100 furnished units, I would like that. And if someone pays $600 on a year-long furnished lease, they're paying for all of our furnishings. So we get to get a lease that's paying the rent, and we fast forward to a year from now, and we now have a unit that is a furnished unit. We get that for free. It also generates revenue. So lead with revenue. We practice what we preach. So if there's something that can pull us closer to our target vision, and it generates revenue, and it's basically like a can't lose deal, right? Let's say we just set all those furnishings on fire when that person vacated, which is pretty unlikely. We still hit a break even. So it's a can't lose deal for us. So why wouldn't we do that? Now, at some point, we might charge more for that product. And if someone's taking an existing furnished unit, we'll charge a little bit more. So they're on a little bit of a different rate schedule. We'll look at kind of what's our rate that we're quoting on Airbnb or on our direct portal. Maybe give them a little bit of a discount off of that if they want, like a 6-month or a year long. So it's a complicated answer to that question, and we have not quite gotten that dialed in. But I hope everyone on this call can learn from that. Like, at one point, we kind of threw our hands up in the air and said, man, it's really complex to price a 4-month furnished lease. What can we do that creates massive value for us, that makes it just a no-brainer for the people that we want to do business with? How can we generate some revenue, and how can we get a free furnished unit? Let's do some no-brainer pricing so that our customers can propel us forward while we create massive value for them. And we will figure out the pricing later. Like Amazon said, we're just going to get everyone on our platform, and then we will figure out this. There's no way we can lose money at this. So we'll figure out just how much money we'll make later. But for now, let's just grow our revenue. Let's grow our platform. Let's grow our customer base. If we do that, we're going to be very successful. So that's what we're doing with those long-term furnished units right this second. But we are renting. And this is a huge victory of these multi-units. We are renting some of our existing units at pretty extraordinary rental rates. So something akin to like 50% over what would be a normal, long-term rental rate. So those leases are 10 times more profitable than like a normal long-term lease. Just extraordinarily profitable. And because they're year-long leases, we get full credit for them for credit underwriting with like a lender as well. They show up on our long-term rent roll as.
And they don't have like the occupancy taxes and those sorts of things that we talked about a few questions ago. We do pare that down a little bit. They don't get like towels and bed sheets, and the kitchen is, we don't do like the oils and the salt and peppers and those sorts of things. It's more of, what you might expect, like, moving into a place and then they bring their own, bed sheets and those sorts of things. Yeah. Good questions, you guys. I think that covers everything. Rachel put the link to the commercial lending webinar in there. So anyone that's thinking about scale, you really should be thinking about how you can master commercial lending as quickly as possible. There's an opening right now, right? Like rates are likely to come down in the next, weeks to months. So sharpen your skills on commercial lending and set yourself up for success to take advantage of this unique opportunity in the marketplace. That is what we have for tonight, our 7 lessons for scaling a short-term rental portfolio fast. I hope you had a ton of fun with it and learned a lot. We'll put in the replay email what our next community power hour is, our quarterly updates, all of those sorts of things for what we have coming up in the pipeline. Until then, take care and we'll see you all later. Good night, everyone.
Night.